and have dominion over the flesh of...
The flesh of the sea,
Yo,
also known as fish. Welcome back to Cradle Convert. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Weston.
So today we're going to be talking about Mawage.
Marriage. Marriage is what brings us together today.
Mawage.
Yeah, I don't have one.
Just kidding.
Hey, don't rub it in, man. Don't rub it in. It that hurts. Anyways.
Power of Christ compels you.
I mean, yeah, we'll do that in marriage. Anyways, so the sacrament of marriage, because it is a sacrament.
Yes.
What does the Catechism have to say about this? Where do we get these things from? So in the Catechism, you can find it in paragraphs 1601 to 1666. And in 1601, it states, "The matrimonial covenant by which a man and a woman establish between themselves a partnership of the whole of life is by its nature ordered toward the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of offspring. This covenant between baptized persons can be raised by Christ to the dignity of a sacrament." So you can see here that Christ then took what a natural marriage is and put it up on a higher level, making it a sacrament. So this is where we get some sanctifying grace and all of the good stuff.
All the good stuff.
All that good stuff. So this is also for life, right? Being a covenant, not just a contract, right? Mm-hmm. So it's on a much deeper level than a contract, mm-hmm. And it's for life. You can see that a lot in the Old Testament. Covenants join families together for good.
Yep.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I know that I was told by a priest when I was getting married is that a covenant is taken so seriously that if you try to break a covenant, you die. So when God makes covenants with his people, he says, I will do this or I will die. And God can't die and God can't lie. So there you go.
Whoa. Right.
And so when we are participating in that covenant, we are also stating that we cannot die. Well, sorry, we can die, but that we cannot break this covenant. It is by God's authority that this covenant exists. So, where do we see this in the Bible? Jesus actually talks about it in both Mark and Matthew. Let's look at Mark. In Mark 10:6-9, he states, "But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man put asunder." So as you can see from the text and what it's talking about, he made them male and female and the two become one flesh. Not only do you become one flesh, but when you are married, there is the spirit of the husband, the spirit of the wife, and the Holy Spirit, God together, all become one. They're all joined. It's the Trinity of the household, also known as the domestic church. What?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that more deeper in a different episode, for sure.
Oh, yeah. So, for this reason, in this text, when Jesus is talking about God made them male and female, and they shall be joined together, this is one of the reasons why we don't believe in homosexual or quote-unquote same-sex marriage. To us, it's not actually a marriage. A marriage is a religious thing. If you want to have a same-sex union, that's something completely different. Also a reason why Catholics hold this uniquely strong stance to the fact that divorce does not exist. I'm going to reinstate this. Divorce does not exist in the Catholic Church. There is no such thing as divorce. Now, people get this confused often with annulment. A divorce is stating that something was there and that we're going to rip it and break it apart. So a family was there, now we're ripping the family apart, and now it's the husband, the wife, and then if there's children, they kind of go with whichever, and they're kind of there, but there's no longer a family union. An annulment is stating that a marriage never even happened. That either someone was unfaithful to what they were, the information that they were giving to the priest or their spouse. They deceived someone in some way, but there was no sanctifying marriage in the first place, and that God did not actually join them two together and did not unite them with himself in that sacrament. So we can see this in 1 Corinthians 7:10-11. "To the married I give charge, not I, but the Lord, that a wife should not separate from her husband. But if she does, let her remain single, or else be reconciled to her husband, and that the husband should not divorce his wife." So a lot of people have problems with this passage because it talks about how no matter what happens, you have to stay with your married spouse if it's a valid marriage. And so a lot of times people bring up, what if my husband's abusive? What if my wife's abusive? What if they originally lied? If they originally lied and are not truly, you were not truly married, then the annulment process takes in place and then you can be separated and then you can remarry. Mm-hmm. However, if the annulment is denied, and let's say you live with an abusive person, you can live either one as brother and sister, where you don't have to talk with each other. You can live in a different house. You don't have to live together. You just have to have the understanding that you are still married. Mm-hmm. What you can do too is, if you're someone who was not aware of this and you are remarried, you now have the option to live as brother and sister. You don't have the option to live as husband and wife. A lot of people find great offense with this. Mm-hmm. But you have to understand that in a Catholic marriage, there is no backing out. There's no do-overs. There's no, oh, shoot, this isn't the person that I originally first thought they were in my mind, and I made them out to be this great person, and hey, they're not meeting my standards, therefore I want an upgrade. Luckily, there is no upgrading my wife, so I'm good. But for you people out there, I'm sorry if you feel that way.
There's no Control Z.
Right. No Control Z.
Can't undo it.
Nope. No undo it. But one thing that makes my marriage stronger is just that understanding. And I knew this when I went into my marriage, that there was no backing out. My wife and I, we get into arguments once in a while. But instead of thinking on the lines of, shoot, this woman doesn't agree with me, I don't like the stance she's taking, she's not thinking like I do, I think I'm going to go get the better one who agrees with me and does what I want. No, there is none of that. It's more of, hey, I'm with this person for the rest of my life. I either have a choice. I can either be happy with this person and give myself fully to her, or I can be angry with her and upset with her, and she can be angry and upset with me, and we could live a terrible marriage. That's it. That's your only two options in a Catholic marriage. So as a husband, it calls me to be a better man and work things out and be a better father in extent of that.
Yeah, exactly. Because husbands, as St. Paul talks about in a much deeper way, are supposed to love their wives the way that Christ loved the church, right? How did Christ love the church? Well, I mean, he died on the cross for them. Like, I give my body up for you, the church.
So right? I have to die on a cross for my wife.
Well, not exactly. But spiritually speaking, actually, yes.
Dang.
Yep. So where do we see this? Well, it is in Ephesians 5:21-32. St. Paul says, "Be subject to one another out of reverence for Christ. Wives, be subject to your husbands, as you are to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, just as Christ is the head of the church, the body of which he is the Savior. Just as the church is subject to Christ, so also wives ought to be in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, in order to make her holy by cleansing her with the washing of water by the word, so as to present the church to himself in splendor, without a spot or wrinkle, or anything of the kind. Yes, so that she may be holy without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as they do their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. For no one ever hates his own body, but he nourishes and tenderly cares for it, just as Christ does for the church, because we are the members of his body. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a great mystery, and I am applying it to Christ and the church." As you can see here, St. Paul is specifically talking and making the distinction of husbands and wives loving each other the way that Christ loved the church, right? Specifically the husband, right? Like Christ is the head of the church, husband's the head of the household in that sense. Now that doesn't mean, I'm the husband, you're going to submit to me, wife, right? Like, but there is something that we've talked about in the business world before called the power of submission, right? Yep. Like submitting to, one higher power, which is God's will and purpose for the marriage and for each other. And, what love is, right? Which is willing the good of the other. And so in submitting yourselves to each other in a loving way, well, you just make a better household and love each other the way that Christ loved the church. Yep. In a deeper way, right? So the sacrament is seen as sanctifying, right? I mean, obviously you can talk more about this before too, but it's not always easy, right? And so Christ instituted the marriage as a sacrament, right? Because what does a sacrament do? It brings about the grace for sanctification and getting each other to heaven. So what's the point of being, married? It is to love your husband or wife in a way that Christ loves the church and is going to get them to heaven, right? Christ says, how did I get my bride, the church, to heaven, but dying on the cross, right? And so how does a husband or wife think they're going to do the same without doing the same thing, right? So in that way, a lot of grace comes about that. And because, you're living together, all these different things, there's, disagreements, all these kind of things, but it helps you, hopefully, to come closer together and resolve, your different, blemishes that you have, right? Mm-hmm. Being able to sanctify yourself towards this. So one thing that's also important to talk about is how, it's not just the husband and wife coming together and saying, oh, we love each other so much, and this love is what's going to hold us together. But what you should remember is that it's important to love God and have his will and purpose set number one, and then find someone who desires that same thing. And then together, you both love God and try to fulfill his purposes and all that stuff, right? So it's a much deeper level than just, oh, we love each other so much. Because like I said before, love is not based on just feelings, but it is on a mutual respect and, willing the good of the other, right? And so it's a choice. It's actually not a feeling in and of itself. Right.
Yeah, when I was actually getting married, you go through something what's called marriage prep. And that's where you and your spouse, you meet with a priest a couple times, at least a couple times. I believe we met with our priest 4 times. And it takes 6 months. At least 6 months you have to wait to the point where you're engaged to the point where you're married. Typically, there are extraordinary circumstances with a lot of things in the church. But typically, one of the things that my priest said to me was, Weston, I want you to know this, and I'm going to tell you this at least 8 times. You are going to die on your wedding day. I was like, whoa, the priest hired a hitman to kill me on my wedding day. That's dark, dude.
Where's the assassin?
Right. No.
It was your best man.
What he's saying... He was my best man. What he's saying is that when you get married, there's a reason that you're wearing black as a man. It's the idea that you are dying. You no longer have the will to go out and party it, or you no longer have the free will to go out and party at night. You no longer have the free will to make just selfish judgment calls. You're not allowed to play video games till all hours of the night, even though some people do it. It completely ruins the marriage. It happens. You're no longer allowed to get blitzed out of your mind. And when I say blitzed, I mean drunk, not high. You're never allowed to get high. So there's a lot of things that you're no longer allowed to do as a man. And he said the same thing to my wife, too. Why she gets to wear white and why I wear black, I don't know exactly, but I hold her on a higher pedestal, so I'm okay with she wears white.
It's because the woman's the pinnacle of creation.
He's smarter than I am, and I'm the married one. It's weird. As you can see, there's some disagreements that have happened in my marriage, and I'm learning. And that would be one thing that I'd warn all people. When you go to get married, and when you're picking somebody to be married, watch who you date and understand who you are dating. And take some time and take some discernment for that. Because,
a lot of discernment, yeah.
Yes. Like I stated, you cannot get out once you get in. It's like being pushed into a hole that has Teflon around the whole outside. Teflon's very slippery. You will not be able to crawl out.
There's no handheld.
It's not that bad. It's really not that bad.
You make it sound really dark.
I know, don't I? It's a deep, dark hole filled with fluffy pillows and... love, kindness, and hugs. Run. Don't do it. Run.
Run. Save yourself.
Save yourself. I mean, I love my wife. She is the best thing that has ever happened to me outside of becoming Catholic.
It's a good thing she doesn't watch these videos.
She does.
Yeah, I know she does.
But let's talk about how the vows look when you actually get to the marriage ceremony. So if we look at the vows, you can see that the priest asks you for your name and your wife's name, and say, have you come here freely and without reserve to give yourself to each other in marriage? You say, yes, or we do, depending on what the priest told you to do. Then it is, will you honor each other as man and wife for the rest of your lives? Yes, we do. Will you accept children lovingly from God and bring them up according to the law of Christ and his church?
Yes.
That's one we have to talk about, because not a lot of people realize that children come with the marriage. To get this, to be married, you are expected to have children. Whoa. And notice that in these vows, it's the same way that God loves us. He loves us fully, truthfully.
Totally. freely, totally, faithfully, and fruitfully.
He's got it. I had to read off the screen and I still didn't get it.
That's okay. I usually have to think about it too.
It's okay. But understand too that fruitfully part is a very important part. You're actually not married in the Catholic Church until you commit the conjugal act, aka sex. I said it. The church and sex. They support sex? What? No.
They actually really support it.
Very pro-sex.
Well, right.
In marriage.
Yeah, in marriage. Because the church sees sex as, it's not dirty, all this other stuff, right? But it's actually holy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so let's see in the Bible where it actually talks about this. Because I actually had a huge debate with my friend Terry, who was the one who converted me to, or helped convert me to the faith, about why you actually don't need to have children. And he brought these two verses to my attention. First, in Genesis 1:28, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. Now, when he first presented this one to me, I actually debated back on him, and was like, no, be fruitful and multiply. It means work, do good deeds, take care of the earth. It doesn't mean children. I was wrong. And then he showed me Psalms. Psalms 127, 3-5 states, Son are indeed a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the sons of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full of them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. So you can see why this was really hard for me to actually debate back. This was one I couldn't figure out a solution to. Even reading more of the Psalms and into other parts of the Bible, which we're not going to go into today. Children are a very important part of the marriage. And now that I have a child and the joy that he brings to my life, it's surreal. People that don't have children and are married, I don't even really understand it. Those that are trying, let it be known that my wife and I, we are praying for you every night. We do pray for people that cannot conceive of children. We really wish that upon everybody that gets to do that. If you cannot, we encourage adoption. So that's where we go with them.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. And this whole be fruitful and multiply part in the vows is also, why the church doesn't believe in contraception. One of the reasons why they don't believe in contraception, because you're inhibiting the ability for that right at that point. So if you're looking for any more information, you can always look at our notes, but also there's some really good books too. Theology of the Body by Pope John Paul II, Love and Responsibility, also by him, and 3 to Get Married by Fulton Sheen. So these are really good books. Also, if they're a little bit too tough to get through, there's some beginner ones and easier things to get through. So don't forget to subscribe, comment,
like,
but most importantly,
pray.